program is from NET, the National Educational Television Network.
I live in a house, oh what a house, where the paint is peeling right off of the ceiling and the plumbing is bad, where the roof is leaky and the floor so squeaky it could drive you mad, I live in a house called poverty, I live in a house called poverty, and I gotta get away from the misery.
It is an untidy but irrevocable fact of American life that the poor pay more for less. All too frequently, when they sign an installment contract or make a purchase, they pay higher prices, get exploited more often, and receive worse quality merchandise than anyone else. The poor man's troubles begin precisely because he is poor. In a society where the pressure to buy is almost irresistible, the poor have to turn to long-term, high-interest credit buying, the most expensive kind, as their only means of moving toward what has been called the better life. Stay uptown, prisoners of their own finances and own psychologies. Their marketplace is the neighborhood store where they buy on time, signing contracts they seldom understand. In every major city, some merchants have discovered they can profit by selling a time plan with all its hidden costs, as well as the merchandise itself. Like any of the world's oldest professions, the enticements are inartistic and very much to the point. But all too often, when the poor do buy, the payments last longer than the life of the furniture and appliances. In other ways, for other necessities, government-sponsored studies have alleged that the poor pay more. A study made by an anti-poverty agency contended that the poor pay more for food than do middle and upper income families. The study was made by the agency MEND, Massive Economic Neighborhood Development, which received funds for its summer consumer program from the federal government's Office of Economic Opportunity. It was directed by attorney Steve Press, focusing on 2 stores in New York, one at 72nd Street and First Avenue, a middle to high income area, the other at 120th Street and First Avenue, a depressed area.
Here we have Sweet Life mayonnaise, which was 31 cents on 72nd Street, 41 cents on 120th Street. We've got Libby's Peaches, which is 39 cents on 72nd Street and 45 cents on 120th Street. We've got vinegar, which was 18 cents on 72nd Street and 25 cents on 120th Street. And then we've got Mazola corn oil, which was 59 cents on 72nd Street and 65 cents on 120th Street. Now, all of these are items that the average housewife would use. We have vegetables, we have juices. All of these items were overpriced in the 120th Street store.
Sloan's response was, Sloan's has always been known for its integrity wherever it operates. Sloan's pursues a one-price, equal quality policy throughout its stores. This single incident happened over 5 months ago and was solely due to human error. The discrepancies spoken of are only a tiny percentage of the over 6,000 items sold in the 120th Street store, and they were immediately corrected and a re-inspection was invited. Sloan's offered to cooperate with Mend anytime it found any problem in a Sloan store, but we have never again heard from Mend or its representatives. This offer still stands. Steve Press said this was not an isolated instance, nor was Sloan's a single example, that these practices are followed by other chain stores as well.
Now, what I mean by this is, on a particular Wednesday, the A&P would advertise in the Daily News or whatever newspaper it advertises in, and it would advertise products at certain prices. And when you went into the store, you might even see the A&P ad there advertising the low prices, but the products themselves were marked with higher prices. The prices on the products had not been changed. And the consumer who would purchase these products would pay the prices that was marked on the product itself, not the price that was marked on the sale in the paper. We went to 3 A&Ps in East Harlem, 106th Street, 110th Street, and 119th Street. In 2 of these A&Ps, we found a total of at least 20 items either priced higher than the ad or not available. Sometimes they even place a sign in front of the product with the sale price on it, and yet the product is marked with a higher price.
It is also Steve Press's contention that in A&P stores in East Harlem, bread and cake supposedly unsold that day and offered at bargain prices were actually left on the shelves for periods up to 2 weeks, often becoming molded. His study for the Mend agency also charged that meat in the uptown A&Ps was of very poor quality, that the ghetto store was, in effect, the dumping ground.
We have tried to bring all these complaints to the attention of the markets involved, and we have pressured them constantly to give the people of East Harlem and the lower income neighborhoods the same type of service that they give to people in the middle income neighborhoods and upper income neighborhoods.
For the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, Vice President N.F. Whitaker stated their policy, quote, "Advertised products and prices are, of course, always to be available to the public. We neither want nor permit any retails in excess of the established prices set by the central office, which apply to all stores in the distribution area," unquote. As to quality of products available, the A&P said, quote, "The identical grade of merchandise, including meats and bakery goods and everything else, is delivered to each store within the borough of Manhattan. Jane Parker bakery products are delivered to all stores in Manhattan daily and are dated for freshness," unquote. Noted Mr. Press, apparently A&P individual store practice does not always follow A&P company policy. Another alleged instance of the poor paying more for food was cited by the Upper West Side Welfare Council, also an anti-poverty agency. They claim that food prices go up at certain chains on the 1st and 16th of the month, the days welfare checks are distributed. On November 1st, 1966, a welfare check day, a Vista volunteer shopped at a chain store in Manhattan. The council had charged that inflated prices were set on the days of the check and would drop off soon thereafter. On this day, some 8 items were purchased. Each of their prices had been studied at the store over a 2-month period. Purchases included oleomargarine, meat, and canned goods. These were the results. Bluebonnet margarine, 35 cents per pound on welfare check day, an average of 33 cents on other days. Pork chops, $1.19 a pound on welfare check day, an average of $1.09 a pound on non-welfare days. Ground round, 89 cents a pound on welfare check day, an average of 79 cents on non-welfare days. Green beans, 2 cans for 39 cents on welfare check days, an average of 37 cents on non-welfare check days. Findings like these were corroborated by the former New York City Department of Markets Commissioner Samuel Kearing in a previous citywide survey. It is an axiom of city life that wherever there is a low-income housing project, there are door-to-door salesmen. Among their wares, food freezer plans.
Well, first of all, they call us on the phone. They offer my wife some steak knives to get into the house. And the salesman comes over, makes an appointment, comes over, and he takes out papers and he shows us this food list, the food plan. And he says, the food is A1, it's supposed to be top choice meat. And he shows us a list of 62 items. So I says to him, well, we don't use fish. We don't use certain things down the line we don't use. He says, well, they'll make up the difference in the other food. I said, well, we have to pay any more. He says, no. He says, well, we have a $12 plan and a $16 plan. For my family, it would be perfect. So I asked him, what about the freezer? I said, we have to pay for the freezer. He says, no, that will come out, the money you saved in the food. So I says, will this food last 4 months? He says, it'll last 4 months. It's guaranteed to last 4 months. So first of all, they sent the freezer over the house. That's the first thing they sent us. We waited 6 weeks for the food to come. We never got the food. Finally, when it did come, we got 16 bottles of ketchup, all kinds of toilet paper, nothing that we can eat, really. When my wife opened up the broccoli was green molded, so she called up the company. They were supposed to come back and pick this up and give us a refund on it, which they never did. So wind up, the bill comes out to $200 some odd. And I called the company up and I said, look, you promised us some Italian veal cutlets. They gave us 8 Italian-style veal cutlets for a family of 8 for 4 months. That was our veal cutlets. The food lasted about a month and a half. We still had a $200 bill for the food. We had a $1,400 bill for the freezer. You can't even get like a soda bottle. You can't stand a soda bottle up in here. The soda bottle is too big. So if you have 5 containers of milk, you're filled up. There's no room for anything, really. I had 30, how many pounds of butter do I have, Connie? 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 Oh, let me hear you. And this here was filled up with nothing but bad food.
I had just gotten married, and the salesman came door to door telling about freezers. Well, this day I was very busy, so he said he would return on a Saturday. When he came on Saturday, he had all these beautiful pictures of freezers piled high with food. And as each month went by, the prices of the food climbed higher and higher for the same order. In the beginning, it was originally said that the price of freezing food would remain, say, $65 a month. After the end of the 5-month period, I was paying something like about $90 a month for food and freezer. And after, say, about 8-month period, it went into the hundreds. So finally, I just stopped. I've spent $800 on this freezer, received about 6 months worth of food, being sued for the other $500, have to pay it at $10 a week, which is just about as much as I'd be paying if I paid it the other way, and I received nothing for it. No services whatsoever. And you can't complain because if they tell you, well, you sign a contract, and you bind it to this contract, and you get trapped in it. You can't get away.
Well, I bought this refrigerator freezer about a year ago, and the 9 months after I got it, it started peeling all around the handle, all across here, and I called downtown to find out what can be done about it. And they gave me 4 different numbers, here, there, and then each time I called, they gave me the runaround. So about 3 to 4 weeks later, they sent a man. They said he was going to call me to see what the refrigerator was peeling or not. So then he knocked at the door. He didn't even call or nothing. He came in, he looked at the refrigerator and says, well, I'm here to do a touch-up job. So therefore I told him, I said, I didn't need no touch-up job. This is supposed to be a brand new freezer. I said, I have 2 coats of paint on the refrigerator. I said, I'm not going to pay $1,300 for a refrigerator. And it's a double, second-hand job. So then he got angry and stormed out the door.
In a New York City housing project, NET Journal set up concealed cameras in order to record a salesman trying to sell a low-income family a $1,400 food freezer plan, which is actually worth far less. The family included Florence Rice of the Harlem Consumers Council, whose voice you will later hear commenting on the sales talk, her daughter, and her son-in-law. The salesman begins by trying to convince the family that the quality of his food is superior to that of the supermarket.
continually, always, only the best, only department choice. As far as vegetables or something of grade A, there's nothing better than that. And when we talk of quality in grocery items, we're talking of things like Maxwell House, Crisco.
The quality of the vegetables is not grade A, and the quality of the groceries that they're talking about, we have found that many times that their substitutes are not the Maxwell House or the Crisco's in which they advertise.
Works something like that.
According to Florence Rice, a typical device of such salesmen is to establish how much a family now spends on food, then to quote it back to them as at least $10 higher.
$30 average. All right, now, let's say, see, the way you order is you order on a 4-month basis.
4 months?
You order on a 4-month basis. That's right. In other words, if you take our program, the next time you'll see me for a new order is 4 months from now. Now, this order amounts to approximately, let's say approximately $300. Okay? Now, here we start out, and we're giving you the finest, most beautiful, wonderful food you ever had. Right? And you pay us the $300 plus.
The salesmen say you order on a 4-month basis, but he's not concerned with selling you food. He's concerned with selling you the freezer. Underlying the whole thing, he's selling the freezer. And he could care less if you bought the food or not, because once you have signed for the food, in which the food is only 4 months, you can drop the food, but you certainly can't drop the freezer.
This is your guarantee that we're going to give you good food. Because every 4 months we're going to come around and say, will you please give us another order?
The guarantee is verbal by the salesman, and that company is not responsible for anything that he promised you at that time. In a court of law, verbal guarantees are almost always not accepted.
The strategy now is to prove respectability. If anything is unsatisfactory, says the salesman, a refund will be given.
Refund how?
In money. You know, in exchange, you give another product. A refund is always money.
In money, he says, in exchange for another product, they always give a refund, always in money. Now, this is a lie, because many of the people who have complained to me have never received any money, and also they have found that many of them have only received 1 month's supply of food and had to pay the $100 and some, which was required for those 4 months.
Another typical ploy is to look at the refrigerator in the kitchen and tell the family that it is woefully inadequate, that what they need is a commercial freezer, that if it breaks down, all the food will be replaced.
Now, when we supply a customer with this unit, we're telling that customer certain things. We're telling them that, number one, if the unit breaks down, and I've seen Cadillacs and Rolls Royces broken down on the side of the road, I don't care how good it is, if it's mechanical, something can go wrong with it. It's possible to break down.
So what you're trying to say is if it breaks down,
If it breaks down, we'll repair it. That's number one. Number two, if you lose food for any reason, whether it be breakdown of the unit, or whether it be a blackout or an electrical failure, we will replace whatever food you have lost. In other words, what we're doing is...
The salesman tells you, he doesn't write it down, but he tells you if it breaks down, they'll repair it. Well, I have documented cases and witnesses of people who it has broke down. It's cost them from $40, $50 to $90 to repair it themselves. They have not repaired it. And also, these people have been garnished. The people that I'm speaking about have been garnished. And this whole food freezer plan is the biggest fraud that I know there is.
About having a phone installed in my home, please?
Do the poor pay more for phone service? At NET, 14 calls were made to business offices of the New York Telephone Company. 7 giving addresses of known high-income areas such as Sutton Place, were told no deposit would be required. 7 giving addresses of known low-income areas such as Harlem were told a deposit of $40 or higher would be required. Here are 2 such calls.
Yes, I'd like to have a telephone installed in 298 Lenox Avenue. William Johnson.
Yes, I'd like to have a telephone installed. I don't have any service now. Michael Scott. Right. No, there's no middle initial. 1 Sutton Place South.
At the New York Stock Exchange. I'm a securities analyst there.
Yes, I'm with the New York Stock Exchange. Securities analysis.
I've been working there for 13 months.
About 13 months.
Prior to working there, I was in school.
Before that, I was in school.
Yes, I do have a bank account. I've got a regular checking account at Manufacturers Hanover. 43rd and 5th.
Yes, I do. Manufacturers Hanover. 43rd and 5th. Regular checking.
Yes, I can give you a reference. Mr. John Ansell, A-N-S-E-L-L. That's at 35th Avenue.
Personal references. Stephen Brooks. 3 Park Avenue South.
A $40 deposit you'll need.
So far as you could see from the information, you would not need a deposit. Is that correct? Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
The New York Telephone Company said its requests for deposits are taken up on an individual basis and are required only where financial responsibility cannot be established. They said many factors, including past credit experience with the customer and credit information, are considered, that the amount generally equals 2 months' bills, and that deposits are refunded if the bills are paid promptly and other credit factors are satisfactory. Jim Horace, General Commercial Manager for Manhattan.
Deposit taking is not a science. It is based largely on experience and judgment. And where judgment is involved, there can be differences. Although address alone is not a sufficient measure of the ability or willingness to pay, in some instances it can be a possible indicator of risk. We have evidence that the incidence of repeated unpaid bills in the same address or similar addresses is most significant. Now, while our losses are higher in some locations than in others, the company has not altered its deposit policy. We do not single out the inhabitants of any one area. In the areas examined in the survey, the East Bronx, the Lower East Side, Harlem, Midtown Manhattan, there is no indication that the percentage of deposits is higher by virtue of address alone. As a matter of fact, in 2 of the areas, the deposits held are less than the average for Manhattan and the Bronx, less than the company average in the entire state. In the remaining 2 areas, it is less than 1% different than that for the average of all Manhattan and the Bronx. I hope in the short time that we have been able to give you reasons why we have a deposit policy, and that we can assure you that we base our deposits on credit information given to us by individual customers and not by address alone.
In neighborhoods where older waves of immigrants have been succeeded by others who are no less vulnerable, another typical example of how the poor pay more is told in the first person. The home of Mr. and Mrs. Ephraim Baez. They have 4 children.
Somebody knocking the door. Then I went and I opened the door. I saw a man with a lot of papers. And he told me, he coming with sale encyclopedia, that the principal of the school 71 sending here to sell encyclopedia. I asked me if he can come inside my house. Then I give you permission to come inside and sit in the chair. And he showed me the picture that I have in the paper. Then I tell him to buy anything, wait for my husband that come in a few minutes. Then my husband coming, and I explain my husband what the man wants. And the men told to my husband and to me that the principal standing here to sell encyclopedia because my kids need to make homework. And that's the problem of the family, that don't have no book to help the kids in the house to do a homework. And to prevent that the kids drop out from school, we need the encyclopedia. Next day, coming with the book and letting here. Then 6 months later, the man coming to the job of my husband and told to the boss that they're going to arrest my husband because he don't pay the encyclopedia. My husband explained to the man that we don't receive no letter, no books to make payment, and we don't know the address to send the money. Then he said to the boss that he's supposed to take out all the money from that payment, all the payment that he's going to receive that day. And my husband said, no, you can't, because I need money for food to my family. And they took it out $30 in that day for the payment. And then next day, they going to a court and with the boss, and they put that they supposed to pay $10 every week from his salary. They took it out $10 every week. The contract say that that company don't have affiliation with no school, with no church, and with no other company.
The poor pay more for less. Every city has its dumping ground for installment furniture constructed as soundly as the salesman's promise. Then why don't the poor buy downtown? At the office of the League of Autonomous Bronx Organizations for Renewal, consumer organizer Florence Rice gives one reason.
Well, you're made to feel uncomfortable. Generally, I have seen where clerks will either follow you around the store, either they'll give some sort of a signal that you're in the store, and you have the feeling of people watching you, and you're just made to feel like you're an animal or you're a thief.
What do the uptown merchants answer to consumers like these? The Webb Furniture Store, according to its manager, is a family store offering credit to the customer. He says it has the only revolving window in New York, attracting people who come from the South who stand there entranced. Most fabric colors are turquoise, chartreuse, and tangerine. Happy gay colors for happy gay people, says manager Henry Seligman.
The customer really has us over a barrel. In an effort to make a sale, we might make certain concessions and perhaps shave the price a bit below what should be a fair markup, because we feel we don't want to lose a sale. So rather than get more, as it's been said, we will get less. About taking advantage of customers, you can't do it for 30 years. You don't. If it was that case, I mean, I would have found a different kind of job a long time ago. We are doing business with a segment of people that Lincoln said there must have been, God must have loved them so much because he made so many of them. Those are the poor people, the average income people. They don't have to be wary. There are so many good stores that competition makes them good. They have to give service. They have to give good prices. The only thing is that you can run into a salesman perhaps who is over-enthusiastic. He doesn't mean any harm, but in some cases he might sell a customer more than he's entitled to. Usually the customer has a proper response to that. They back out. But the only time is this, when some people maybe force a salesman to sell them a higher price article and put themselves deeper in the hole. But the more experienced salesman would switch away from that and explain to the customer, because he just has to make a sale in the person's ability to pay.
At Columbia University, the author of the book, The Poor Pay More, David Kaplovitz.
In many respects, the poor are a captive audience. The poor traditionally have what we would call a limited effective scope. They tend to limit their activities to their immediate neighborhood. They tend to be intimidated by the downtown stores. So in part, they voluntarily shop within their neighborhoods. But in addition, they are considered to be such poor credit risks by the more legitimate merchants that the only opportunity they have to make the purchases they want is in their immediate neighborhood. And unfortunately, there are all too many merchants, all too eager to provide them with the goods they want at exorbitant prices. And the merchandise all too frequently turns out to be very shabby.
In a ghetto neighborhood in New York, concealed filming was made of the pitch given to prospective furniture customers. The analysis of the salesman's monologue is by Dr. Kaplowitz.
Set. And what I can do is, I do this with a lot of my customers, I give you the kitchen set free. That I do. In other words,
set?
Yes. In other words, if you buy 3 rooms of furniture from me, understand?
Yes.
I give you a kitchen set free.
What the salesman, of course, doesn't point out is that the markup on the other 2 sets of furniture is quite exorbitant, and that the kitchen set is extremely flimsy and perhaps not worth more than $25.
Coffee table
And the cost of that kitchen set is more than made up in the markup on the other kinds of merchandise that is included in the sale.
This is the bedroom set that I have. This bed here. Now, you can get this on the special price. You can get this here with this chest, this dresser, and a bookcase headboard, and a box spring and mattress. This is $300. So it's $300 and $339 comes to $639.
Here we see a purchase that comes to $639. Now, what should be understood is that the customer probably came into that store because he read a sign saying 3 rooms of furniture for only $149. This is a classic example of the bait ad and the switch sale. Here we see a salesman trying very much to identify himself with the customer. He is trying to show the customer that he is really his friend, who shares his concern for high taxes and his concern for the high cost of living.
12 years ago, 2%, that's 3%, that's 4%, now 5%. Now, when the heck are they going to say? Look, every time I have to write it, I get sick to my stomach. God forbid they should take from the big man, the guy that's got the millions, you know, and dig him for a little more, hit him for a little more. No, they don't do it. They make it a little easier for them.
And now the classic misstatement of the costs. A barrage of figures by the salesman, capped by the request for a deposit.
It's $620 that you're financing. Now, $7.71 is life insurance. God forbid anything happens to the wage earner, to you. The merchandise is all paid for as an insurance policy. You know?
Yeah.
And then you have $120, which is a credit charge for 2 years. In other words, it's 10% a year. So 10% of $620 is $62. And another year, 10% is $120. So $120 credit charge, but that's all in the payment. $31.17 a month, you know? Now, how much can you put down now?
But as David Kaplowitz has noted, insurance can be bought cheaper. 10% is not the true credit charge. It is actually double that. And the real tragedy, says Kaplowitz,
is that the customer hardly ever knows what he is paying in the way of a true annual interest rate. Clearly, the low-income customer cannot pay cash for such expensive merchandise. And so he must bear the cost of these finance charges, which bring the final price of the merchandise to a great deal more than he himself had ever anticipated.
Exactly what happens to the poor once they have bought on credit in ghetto stores? As an Appalachian miner once asked, if you can't read the signs, how are you going to know which way to go? Once the contract has been signed by the low-income customer, it is usually sold or assigned by the merchant to a credit company specializing in collection work. If the customer is dissatisfied with his purchase, there is seldom recourse and rarely a guarantee. If a payment is missed for whatever reason, a summons is swiftly issued. Sometimes it is served, frequently it is not. This latter method is called sewer service. A precise definition is given by the owner of the Suffolk Summons Service, Vernon Carpenter.
Well, the phrase sewer service has been used because the process service
get an average 75 cents to $1 to serve a paper. They go to a house 3 or 4 times, they can't find anybody home, and they don't get paid unless they serve the paper. So they get tired of going, so they just make out an affidavit they served it. They want the money, they don't want to waste any more time going there. So they make an affidavit they served the paper when they actually never served the paper at all. And the average poor person who's being sued for a small amount of money, they can't hire a lawyer to go into court to try to open up the judgment.
Because the defendant doesn't appear, a default judgment is entered. Now the city marshal takes over. Repossession is his business. Public auction is the auctioneer's. The difficulty comes in trying to find out when and where they take place. Even beyond the auction, the victim usually finds he is indebted at the least for the original contract price of the goods.
¿Cómo va el caso tuyo?
New York's Lower East Side is Ray Norrell's beat. He is a practitioner of what has been called a dying art, the fighting attorney. Norrell is not the least bit self-conscious about this description. His agency is Mobilization for Youth, for which he handles most of the consumer fraud cases. To his clients, he is a first and last resort. Norrell is against a new kind of bigotry, no less despicable than any of the more familiar kinds, that of the indifferent merchant.
They come in, they grab as much as they can possibly grab in a given instance, and they leave the neighborhood. And they come back the next day and grab as much as they can and leave the neighborhood. Very few merchants in this area actually donate to the neighborhood, give anything to the neighborhood. It's usually on a one-sided basis. Take as much as you can take, as quickly as you can take it. And, wipe your hands of the whole matter. I spoke to you about assigning contracts. Once they assign the contract, they almost wipe their hands of the entire matter. They don't want to get involved at all. I wouldn't say that.
Sam Winokur, manager of the Model Furniture Warehouse in Harlem.
This is regulated by the law. I think you're familiar. They have here the New York banking. They regulate, and they the one that you see, like we have a payment chart, and we follow that. Now, we don't overcharge. If they want to buy on credit, of course. If I say there is different rates. If you borrow money from a bank, the rate is lower, but our rate is regulated by the law, and we charge what it's supposed to be.
Mr. Winokur was asked how often he has garnished, the legal phrase for deducting payments from a salary, which often leads to dismissal from the job.
We don't like to garnish salaries because, but there is no choice. We have to.
How often do you repossess?
We try not to repossess. You see, we try. We have most of the cases when the customer can pay. They're supposed to pay, let's say, monthly. They fall behind a month or two. And if they can fulfill the payments, we try to work it out in a way that so they pay less. Sometimes work is a little bit slow. We try not to repossess if we can help it. So actually, since we're here, I never repossess a piece of furniture so far.
Now, I'd like to know, what about the Spanish-speaking person that you have here?
What do you want to know?
Can they understand the language that do they read?
Well, I speak Spanish.
But they can't read that in Spanish.
Well, they don't have to be. They don't have to understand it as long as I put here all the figures, right? And there is no empty spaces, no blank spaces here, right? They say no blank spaces, and I says to them the payment is $15.83 for 24 months, and they get a copy of this with $15.83 with 24 consecutive months payment. This is an international language. Figures. That's why we have Spanish-speaking people here.
Here's your ad in the Daily News, is that correct?
Yes.
So, suppose now you show us this furniture. What does it say, 3 rooms for $112?
Right.
Now, is this the kind of furniture that you would be pleased to sell them, or would you try to prove that great about it?
Well, of course, you see, 3 rooms of furniture for, as the way that is advertised, $112 is not the best. Can be because the price is very low. I would like to, this is up to the customers too, to sell something a little better. I would like to. If the customer insists to buy this here, we sell it because we advertise, and this is no false advertisement, we have it. There's a lot of places that they don't show what they advertise. They don't have it. Just, but we have what we advertise.
Okay, suppose you show us these 3 rooms for
I have it upstairs.
Okay, we'll go upstairs.
Tucked away upstairs, far from the normal sightline of any customer, was the 3-room set. Mr. Winokur's ad said one could have it for $2 a week. Most salesmen would say it costs less than the price of a pack of cigarettes a day.
What's about the average markup in furniture? Can you tell us? In the trade itself.
The average markup, it's about a number.
Pardon?
A number. It's about 80 to about 80%.
80%.
Average.
80%. 80 to 100%.
Professor David Kaplowitz claims the poor pay more cycle only starts with the merchant.
What keeps the neighborhood merchant going? What do they need? They're in the clutches of something called the finance company. They need the funds from that finance company, the guy they sell the paper to. They need that money to keep going. So a lot of the really vicious practices are practiced by that finance company. They're the ones who are experts in collection. They know how to dun the customers. They know how to put the pressure on them. Then the next question is, what keeps the finance company going? Where do they get their money? And then you have to push it another step. And suddenly you're at the big banks on Wall Street. You're suddenly in the respectable banking community of America, because it's the respectable banking community that finances the credit company. So the big banking interests have their clutches into the finance company. The finance company has its clutches into the neighborhood merchant, who in turn has his hooks into the low-income customer. And so we have a progression here extending from the poor sucker in the ghetto up to the respectable financial industry on Wall Street.
Beyond an overhaul of this kind of system, what can be done to make the poor less vulnerable? Some of the people most involved show us. In San Francisco, the director of the Bay Area Neighborhood Development Agency, Art Danforth.
No, I wouldn't say the situation is hopeless. I'd say it's very difficult, and it isn't anything that's going to be solved in 2 or 3 or 5 years. Besides a lot of answers that fall in the general economic field, there are 5 specific things in this field that I think we're going to need to do. First, we're going to have much stronger legal protection against fraud and deception than we have now. Second, we're going to have to develop information that's in interesting and easy reading form so that more people can make use of it. Third, we're going to have to recruit and train people from the areas in which we're working so that they can be organizers and advisors on problems of this kind. And in addition to all of this, it's extremely important that we work with the people in these areas to help them organize cooperatives, credit unions, buying clubs, whatever other activities will give them a handhold in their community on their own economy. Somehow or other, we have to bring all Americans into the mainstream, and it'll take this kind of organization to do it.
A consumer education class at the Spanish American Academy in New York. It is funded by the Office of Economic Opportunity. Both students and instructors are residents of East Harlem. The lesson, see how Johnny Merchant runs. First, ignore all ads which offer everything for the home at a low price, including the kitchen sink. Second, always try to buy on cash for tangible savings. But when that is not possible, heed the third lesson. Take out a bank loan at 6% interest, rather than the merchant's 10% or higher, to cover the total sales price. Another self-help technique is organizing a food-buying cooperative. Every Friday morning, volunteers of Puerto Riqueños Unidos roll into the Bronx Terminal Market. They are Gus Pamo and Pedro Otero, who will purchase such items as rice, flour, potatoes, fruit juices, and canned goods from wholesale grocers at, of course, wholesale prices. Some of this money has been given as a deposit by the customers themselves. Most of it has been laid out by the many volunteers who lead the cooperative. Late that morning at their headquarters on the Lower East Side, the Cooperative Grocery Store is open for business. Goods are distributed to housewives who have placed their orders the day before. In operation just 6 months, the cooperative, by all measures, is a success. Gus Pamel.
Most of this family that we serve in here, that we try to help, they have big family, a lot of kids. And they really try to buy over here and they save it $2 or $3, which they can use it for other things that they need in the home. Well, right now it's just around this community, 4th, 5th, 6th Street, 2nd Street, 3rd Street. But the way this is growing, we don't know if we might even get people from New Jersey someday. We might have to get a store of our own and maybe open a few stores.
We are about to begin our project. But
another form of community action to fight exploitation in poor neighborhoods is underway by the New York City Department of Markets. Known as Operation Lamb Chop, today it joins together test shoppers from the neighborhood NAACP with department inspectors.
If you buy a steak, make sure that the butcher wraps the steak as is and does not trim it. If you buy a chicken, make sure that it's oven ready, that the butcher does not have to cut off either the legs or the head. With that item, and remember you buy only one item per shopper, you will then go outside and meet your inspector, and the inspector will return to the store with the shoppers, and he will check to see whether you've been overcharged on the purchase. There is one other point, one other technique that we use, and that's the synchronized time technique. We all are going to set our watches before we leave, and we intend to hit every store at exactly the same moment. Our director has just informed me that according to our time schedule that we will probably hit the stores at exactly 3 o'clock. So if we'll synchronize our watches to 2:19, at 3 o'clock, we expect every shopper to be in the store that was assigned to him or to her.
Outside the chain store, the shoppers show the inspectors what they have purchased. Now, it is time for the confrontation. The test shoppers have gone back to the meat counter to be joined by an inspecting team. At issue, the weight and price of a chicken purchased by the test shoppers.
$1.74. Chicken's $45 a pound. According to the price that you have figured here, you charged the lady at the rate of 3 pounds and 14 ounces for chicken that weighs slightly over 2 3/4 pounds. That's a short weight of over a pound.
Over a pound?
Take a look at the scale right here. Here's the chicken. Take a look at the scale. Stephen Husky, what does it say? How is it $1.74 when it's $1.25?
I'm making a mistake.
Charge. You want to get us your last inspection certificate, please? That the violation is returnable on November 16th at 137 Center Street before the Commissioner of Markets. Should you fail to appear, you're subject to a penalty, mandatory fine of $100 for each and every violation if there's no appearance. So,
you want to give me
Back up a little bit so I get my customers in, please. Thank you, sir. Okay? Who's next?
Anything else with that? I see your last inspection certificate, please.
On the scales, all right, can we do some business while we're at this, please?
The inspection team next checks out a neighborhood fish store, surveying weight, price, and labeling practices. The inspectors contended in this instance that the merchant failed to post prices and misrepresented a type of fish to the test shopper. The merchant claimed otherwise.
Robert, a lot of people don't know the name of pollock. No one even advertises a pollock. That's what it's saying. That's what it says. It's a steak. I didn't say it was cod. I did not. I said it's light. I said it's light. I'm sorry.
This is a violation for failing to post prices on the shrimp and various other commodities offered for sale on the store premises. That's charge number 1. Charge number 2 is for representing pollock, a
species of fish to a test shopper as blue cod, a completely different species of fish.
Overall results of Operation Lamb Chop showed of 11 stores checked, 7 had a total of 14 violations. These included short wait, no price postings, obstructed and incorrect scales.
Hello, Mr. Fredericks. How are you?
One last solution is offered, which, if thoroughly implemented throughout the country, could be the most meaningful, that of legal recourse. Brian Rappaport, an attorney for legal aid, talks to an opposition lawyer. His client is Mrs. Gloria Burkett, whose husband's salary had been garnished when he refused to make payments on a freezer he contended was repainted and probably secondhand. Paint samples of this freezer were chemically analyzed by the Perkin-Elmer Corporation of Norwalk, Connecticut. Their findings, the freezer had been painted over. This information was given to Attorney Rappaport.
Was your paint because it was damaged in transit? It was touched because it was damaged in transit. All right, look, Bob, well, according to my information, it wasn't just touched up. It was completely repainted, and the rubber on it is just crumbling apart. The whole machine is turning yellow. That's right. It was supposed to be a first-hand box, and if it was a second-hand box, then she was sold something she never bargained for, and she paid a price for a first-hand box. I think she's got I think she's got a fraud case, because if a man comes into our house and offers to sell a first-hand new freezer, I don't know what his intent was. I mean, I really don't. I mean, I got a situation on my hands here now.
A second call is made to seek a release of the salary garnishment.
I mean, I don't know. I took about $15 from his salary, I think. Approximately $15. And I need the money back for to pay her rent. But you know my people, she has to pay her rent. What can I do? I mean, it's only 1 week. If it was 4 or 5 weeks, I would say, fine, we'll hold it in escrow. But it was only 1 week. It was never. I don't think the marshal picked it up yet. All right, and tell the employer to get back the money. The 1 week. Okay, very good. What? I know you're going a very long way on this. I know. I appreciate that you're going out of your way. I know that. I know what you mean. Okay, bye-bye.
For the poor, there are seldom happy endings. Though the freezer can be kept for the $350 already paid, Mrs. Burkett must now pay $125 to the food company as settlement of still another suit on the food portion of the contract. If this explanation is complex, so is the dilemma of the poor pay more. Attorney Ray Norrell.
Well, I tell you, I'm not a psychiatrist, but it would seem to me, from speaking to the people in the area, that they feel that their cause, and I'm not saying that the Puerto Ricans feel this way, I would say anybody who lives in the ghetto area feels that the cause is almost hopeless, that they'll never be able to get out, and they're desperate right now. And this is, I believe this is the reason why we're having all of these problems in the city. The people in the ghetto area are desperate. They know that if they continue this way, their sons will have this problem, and their children will have this problem.
Here then he is, wrote James Agee of the Tenant Farmer, whose desperation surely matches that of the city slum dweller. Here is this tender and helpless human life, faced with the constant lack of money, with need, with backbreaking work, with knowledge of being cheated, unable to protest or order it otherwise. Here in this time, on this vast continental sorrowful clay, encamped, imprisoned. The tangled roots of poverty and their weeding out do not invite glib solutions. Some suggestions might be helpful. In food buying, as this program has shown, constant pressure must be kept on stores to ensure that their prices are not set on a double standard. One price for the comfortable, another for the poor. It has already been demonstrated how the poor themselves can bring about such pressure through neighborhood organization. More government funds should be made available through the War on Poverty program and other federal sources for projects which enable the consumer to protect himself. In furniture and appliance installment buying, the only thing clear is that most contracts are not. An effective step to counter this would be regulations requiring that the customer be informed when his contract is being sold to a finance company. Also that he be told the total purchase price, including the true interest rate he will be paying at the time of sale, not merely the dollars per month and number of payments. The courts could help by refusing to honor contracts which are deceptively worded, written to confuse the customer. Next, justice must no longer be a sometime thing for the poor. Bureaus which now exist to protect the consumer against fraud should be given tougher legislation and more staff to handle the volume of cases. Where no bureaus exist on local, state, and federal levels, they should be quickly established and actively supported. This may help give the poor man resources he has been without for so long, adequate legal protection, representation, and a strong voice in his own affairs. At the core of all this, of course, is the fervent wish that morality could be as simply legislated as a consumer code. Whenever a merchant profits by the open ignorance of the customer, whenever a door-to-door salesman misrepresents the quality of the goods as well as his own credentials, whenever big business invisibly subsidizes small and shady business, then the poor pay more. And when they do, so does each of us. Am I my brother's keeper? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth out to me from the ground.
I live in a house. Oh, what a house. Where the paint is peeling right off of the ceiling and the plumbing is bad. The plumbing is bad. Where the roof is leaky and the floor so squeaky it could drive you mad. It could drive you mad. I live in a house called poverty. I live in a house called poverty. And I gotta get away from the misery. I live in a house. Oh, what a house. Where the babies are crying and the old folks dying, but nobody cares. Nobody cares. Where my sisters and brothers and my fathers and mothers gotta sleep on chairs. I sleep on chairs. I live in a house called poverty. I live in a house called poverty. And I gotta get away from the misery. I live in a house called poverty. I live in a house called poverty. I live in a house called poverty. I live in a house called poverty.
This has been NET Journal, a weekly look at the events, issues, and people of the world today.
This is NET, the National Educational Television Network.